Hello there and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett, and in this bulletin we'll bring you all the latest updates on the United Nations General Assembly and other stories developing around the world as well. First, the headlines. An action-packed week of the UNGA kicks off. The United Nations General Assembly debate is to begin in a few hours with Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro and United States President Joe Biden to be the first two speakers. French President Emmanuel Macron speaks to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and they discuss issues related to the Indo-Pacific region. This as France deals with the fallout from Australia's cancellation of a $40 billion French submarine deal. Friction between the US, Australia and European nations over the AUKUS partnership grows. Germany slams Australia over ditching the submarine contract with France and says it will be difficult to rebuild trust. India's Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla says the non-recognition of UK-licensed vaccine Covishield is discriminatory. India raises the matter strongly in talks with the UK's new Foreign Secretary.
You are sending us back to work with a clear mandate to get Canada through this pandemic and to the brighter days ahead.
Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau returns to power in a hotly contested election in Canada. Preliminary results, though, suggest that Trudeau's failed to gain an absolute majority. Global stock markets are caught up in the grip of contagion fears sparked by troubles at China's Evergrande. World's top markets ended in the red yesterday, with the S&P having its worst day since May this year. US President Joe Biden will address the United Nations General Assembly in just a few hours from now. At the summit, President Biden's expected to push back against the idea that the United States is plunging into a new Cold War with rivals including China and Russia. Reports suggest Biden will instead stress diplomacy and vigorous competition in his speech at the annual UN summit. A senior Washington official has told the news agency AFP President Biden will communicate that he does not believe in the notion of a new Cold War with the world divided into blocs. The official went on, he believes in vigorous, intensive, principled competition. So we expect the president to try and drive home the message that ending the war in Afghanistan closed a chapter focused on war and opens a chapter focused on personal, purposeful, effective American diplomacy. This has been confirmed by the White House press secretary as the way that the day is expected to play out.
He will make absolutely clear that he is not looking to pursue a new Cold War with any country in the world. We will continue to pursue our interests. We will continue to lift up global priorities, but that is not the objective or the policy of the United States.
In his first address to the United Nations as US President, Joe Biden will stress that Washington will work with allies and partners to solve problems that can't be solved by military force. Ahead of his first speech as president at the UNGA, Joe Biden has also met with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in New York. Biden said a strong partnership with the UN was more important now than ever, and that no one country can solve key problems alone.
The Secretary General and I share a strong commitment to the principles of human freedom and human dignity on which the UN was founded. I went back and reread the Charter. I remember we sometimes forget what the founding principles were, not you, we, the world. Every UN member state likewise has an obligation to uphold those fundamental commitments and that we've all made. And normally the task is already ahead for each one of us, and it's real.
Following his UNGA address, President Biden will meet Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison in New York before returning to Washington to meet British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Now, the UNGA takes place less than a month after the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, ending a 20-year war. The speech gives Biden his biggest opportunity yet to talk about the direction of US foreign policy. There's been criticism at home and abroad that the US troop withdrawal from Afghanistan in August was chaotic and poorly planned, leaving behind some US citizens and Afghan allies who could face reprisals from the Taliban. So it could be a challenging week for the US president that will be dominated at times by foreign policy. Amid questions around his handling about the US pullout from Afghanistan, he's also likely to face questions about a nuclear submarine deal with Australia and the UK that has angered France. President Biden will host the first in-person summit of the leaders of the Quad grouping as well. This will be attended by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Japanese Prime Minister Suga. At the UNGA, President Biden will also issue an all-hands-on-deck call for global cooperation to end the COVID-19 pandemic that's ravaged the world since early 2020. President Biden's also expected to highlight US commitments on climate change. WION has a large team on the ground in New York with 10 reporters in Washington and the Big Apple. We will be covering all of the developments as they happen. Susan Tirani now reports from UN headquarters.
The general debate, the centerpiece of the United Nations General Assembly, is set to begin on Tuesday. And Brazil's president, who will be the first speaker, will address the assembly in person. He already made headlines by refusing to take the COVID vaccine and attending the UNGA 76 in person. So it'll be interesting to see how the UN's honor system, vaccination honor system, will work. Something to take a look at. Also in the morning will be U.S. President Joe Biden, who will address the UN General Assembly for the first time as U.S. president, while he is expected to press China on climate, COVID, and human rights. He's also expected to say that he does not believe, quote, in the notion of a Cold War. The president is also expected to call for alliances and, quote unquote, intensive diplomacy. Later, Iran's new president, Ibrahim Raisi, will also address the General Assembly. He is not in New York, won't be addressing the GA in person, but rather in a recorded video address. It will be interesting to also listen to what he has to say, and his address will be worth a close listen amid the stalled nuclear talks in the framework of the JCPOA, or the Iran nuclear deal between Iran and the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, plus Germany. Of course, we'll bring you up to speed on the latest as the day progresses. For now, I'm Susan Tehrani in New York for WION World is One.
On Friday, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be meeting US President Joe Biden at the UNGA. The two leaders are expected to hold discussions on counter-terrorism, Afghanistan, and finding common ground while dealing with terrorism. A senior Biden administration official has said the relationship between the US and India is like a relationship between two people and is deeper than just a government-to-government relationship. The official also said the leaders will focus on strengthening deep ties between their peoples and shared democratic values that have underpinned the special bond between the US and India for more than 7 decades. Indian Prime Minister Modi and President Biden last spoke over the phone on April the 26th. Both leaders have spoken virtually on multiple occasions since Joe Biden became US President in January. On September the 24th, the first ever in-person Quad Leaders Summit will be held at the White House. US President Joe Biden, Indian Prime Minister Japanese Suga, and Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison will be in attendance. Last week, the Indian Ministry of External Affairs said that shared regional issues would be up for discussion, and a day ahead of the maiden bilateral meet between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden, US Vice President Kamala Harris will be meeting the Indian Prime Minister. That will be the first meeting between those two leaders. Harris has previously spoken with Prime Minister Modi over the phone during the COVID-19 crisis.
But on issues like you raised, the South China Sea, speak up when there are actions.
Now, while Brazil prepares to deliver the opening speech at the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly, the country's unvaccinated President Jair Bolsonaro has drawn flack for his persistence in not getting jabbed yet. This time, Bolsonaro has turned down British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's calls to get AstraZeneca vaccines. That came during a meeting in New York on Monday. The two leaders met on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly gathering. Focused on boosting efforts to fight climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic, during the meeting, Bolsonaro reacted to Johnson's call to get AstraZeneca vaccines, suggesting he doesn't agree with him and saying, "Not yet." Before he left for New York, Bolsonaro had boasted about not being vaccinated, claiming his immune system would be strong enough to fend off the coronavirus and saying he doesn't need the vaccine because he's already immune to COVID-19. Unvaccinated Bolsonaro was photographed eating pizza on a New York sidewalk. Brazil's Secretariat Minister Luiz Eduardo Ramos tweeted a photo of him enjoying a slice outside with several members of his delegation. The tweet was captioned, "Luxury dinner in New York." Bolsonaro doesn't meet the city's COVID-19 vaccine requirements for indoor dining. The city requires anyone wanting to eat indoors to provide proof of at least one shot. The city began enforcing a vaccine mandate last week. But the United Nations, for its part, requires world leaders arriving for its General Assembly to simply say that they will adhere to an honour system, which in theory sees them state that they are fully vaccinated against the coronavirus. The COVID-19 pandemic is one of the top agenda items at the UNGA 76, and the first speaker of the session is so far refusing to be vaccinated. Now, let's look at some past UNGA sessions. We've seen bizarre yet iconic moments at times that have made global headlines.
What would you expect world leaders to do at the UNGA? Banging the shoe on the table would not be one of the choices, yet it happened on the 12th of October 1960. Nikita Khrushchev, the then president of the Soviet Union, did exactly that. What made the former strongman of Soviet Union so angry? Philippines spoke about the atrocities of the communist dictatorship. But still, banging the shoe is taking it a bit too far. If Khrushchev chose to react to criticism in extreme fashion this millennium, Hugo Chavez of Venezuela set new benchmarks.
Yesterday the devil was here, right here. It smells of sulfur, this podium from where I'm speaking. Yesterday, ladies and gentlemen, from this same place, the President of the United States, who I call the devil, came here speaking as the owner of the world.
Chavez, the then president of Venezuela, smelled sulfur because Bush, the devil, addressed the UN. Chavez also compared Bush's speech to Alfred Hitchcock's movies and gave a little title to Bush's speech, The Devil's Recipe. If Chavez called the former US President Bush devil, then Libya's former President Gaddafi termed the UN Security Council the Terror Council. That too, in his first appearance at the UN in 2009.
Our President of the Security Council is security feudalism, political feudalism, for those with permanent seats, protected by them and used against us. It should be called not the Security Council, but the Terror Council.
Clearly, the General Assembly is a venue for controversial props. Just ask Benjamin Netanyahu, who illustrated the Iran nuclear threat. And this report won't be complete without Donald Trump.
Accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. America's so true. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
Should the General Assembly of United Nations be used to make such extreme remarks, statements that could jeopardize global peace? We leave that for you to ponder upon. We report WION World is One.
European Union Chief Charles Michel has accused the United States of a lack of loyalty. He says there needs to be clarity about the intentions behind the nuclear submarine deal between the United States, the United Kingdom and Australia, and that such a move could reinforce European efforts to build their own defence capacity. Slamming the US for a lack of transparency, Charles Michel said, quote, "The elementary principles for allies are transparency and trust. It goes together. We are observing," he says, "a clear lack of transparency and loyalty." Michel suggested disappointment with US President Joe Biden, who took office vowing to shore up alliances after his predecessor Donald Trump had at times weakened them. Michel says that with Trump, at least it was clear that the EU was not, in his opinion, a useful partner. Charles Michel says he'd hoped for a better partnership under Joe Biden, and America is back.
During the discussion, the ministers expressed a clear solidarity toward France, and this announcement ran counter to call for greater cooperation with the European Union in the Indo-Pacific.
French officials, meanwhile, have continued their diplomatic pushback. French Foreign Minister Le Drian has accused the United States of betrayal and Australia of backstabbing. Le Drian is in New York for the UN meetings, but he has no separate meetings scheduled with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He calls the submarine deal a breach of trust and has urged the European Union to think hard about its alliances.
I will not speculate on the discussion to take place between President Macron and Biden in the coming days. It is important that these discussions take place, but I can't speculate as to the content of the talks. What I can tell you is that it's not just about the brutal, unexpected and unexplained breach of a contract, a 2016 contract that was being implemented. What matters now, first of all, the breach of trust between partners, because partners in alliance means transparency and predictability. It requires explanation. It is about talking to one another, not hiding from one another, in particular on matters of importance. And all of that did not happen, and we need to talk about it.
Ça veut dire se parler, ne pas se cacher.
US President Joe Biden is said to be looking forward to speaking with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron by telephone this week. A senior US official has told the news agency AFP that Biden wants to talk with Macron about the way forward. This after Paris recalled its US ambassador over the deal, which killed a massive planned French sale of submarines to Australia. The US position on the submarine deal and the AUKUS pact is clear, though. Officials say Washington understands the French position, but believes the deal is necessary. Now, coming up on Sunday, one of Europe's staunchest opponents historically to legal abortion could fall. San Marino, a deeply Catholic republic country, will hold a referendum to a law dating back to 1865. In the landlocked enclave, women who end their pregnancies risk 3 years imprisonment. The term is twice as long for anyone who carries out their abortion. The campaign is in its final week, and emotions have been running high between traditionalists and the referendum's supporters.
San Marino, one of Europe's smallest countries, a tiny and deeply conservative republic in northern Italy, is preparing to head to the polls on Sunday to vote in an historic referendum on abortion. San Marino, which currently has a total ban on terminations, will decide whether to overturn a law from 1865 and legalise abortion within the first 12 weeks of pregnancy. The debate has divided the landlocked Catholic enclave, which is home to 33,000 people. Veteran abortion rights advocate Vanessa Muratori has been campaigning for a change in the law for almost 2 decades.
I would like San Marino to treat its citizens better, that it recognises full citizenship of the San Marinese women, because being unable to decide on one's own body and pregnancy means not being fully recognised as a citizen.
As it stands, women who terminate their pregnancies risk 3 years imprisonment. The term is twice as long for anyone who carries out the procedure. But the No campaign is determined, using the slogan, "One of Us." Its core message is that the unborn child should have the same rights as all San Marino citizens. Marino Corsi from the campaign.
We oppose this because we believe human life is a non-negotiable value.
San Marino women who want to abort normally go to Italy, where abortion has been legal since 1978, and pay around €1,500 for private healthcare. The world's oldest republic, San Marino has lagged behind its European neighbours when it comes to women's rights. Women only obtained the right to vote in 1960 and have only been allowed to hold political office since 1974. If the vote is successful, the list of European countries banning abortion will be reduced to the Mediterranean island of Malta and the micro-states of Andorra, Liechtenstein and the Vatican City.
Inspired at first by a desire to beat the city's traffic, a group of Cambodian students has designed a prototype manned drone. They hope it can eventually be used to ferry people in their city and even help fight fires. The students believe it needs a couple more years before the drone's completely ready and fully tested.
In Phnom Penh city, we have big problems related to traffic jams. So we did some research about this before building the drone. So we came up with this drone project as we had this idea that we wanted to solve some problems for our society by making a drone taxi, as well as inventing drones for firefighters to help put out fires. For example, for high-rise buildings that the average fire truck can't reach, this drone could transport the water, or at least it could carry the water hose to very high floors on the building. For the drone, when we see it flying without a pilot, a lot of it shakes in the air. But when I sit in it and fly it, it becomes more stable and I feel so excited about flying it.
And that is all we have time for on today's WION Live broadcast from London. Do stay tuned to WION for all the latest from the UN General Assembly and other stories developing around the world. Thanks for being with us.
This is right, Arab.